All right, it is 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys all for being here. I'm Andy Cheadle-Ford with the Secular Student Alliance, and today we are going to be talking about strategies for student advocacy on campus. We could, and we've been saying this all day, we could hold an entire conference just on this very brief introduction. So we're going to gloss over a lot of things, but if you have any questions, we do have time for Q&A afterwards. And I'm going to let my fellow people introduce themselves real quick before we get started.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm the Regional Campus Organizer for California and Nevada for the Secular Student Alliance, and I love my job, in case you weren't here for the panel. Yes, and I love talking about advocacy, really anything that has to do with empowering young people to be treated as equals like anyone else in the world would be.
I'm Liz Liddell. I'm the Director of Campus Organizing at the National Secular Student Alliance. I also love my job, and I'm totally going to shamelessly use a moment to promote the other big project I'm working on right now, which is Openly Secular. I'm sort of the logistics coordinator, man behind the curtain for the Openly Secular campaign. So I know that got mentioned this morning. We've had a lot of talking about how coming out of the closet and openly identifying as secular is a very, very powerful thing to do. And so if that's something you agree with, keep your eyes open. You will be hearing more about Openly Secular in the months to come, especially in September. We'd love to have you on board. So.
And I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. I love my job. And I forgot to actually say what I do. I'm the high school specialist with the Secular Student Alliance. I work with all of our high school affiliates and individual student activists that are at the high school level. And I'm also the coordinator for our Secular Safe Zone program. So if you want to learn any more about either of those programs, just stop me and I will talk about it at length. Because I love to talk about it.
Because we love our jobs.
Yeah, because we love our jobs. And Liz isn't making me say that, by the way. I actually do love my job. So, first of all, why, as a student, should you get involved in campus advocacy? Well, students are becoming a very important voting bloc in politics. In the past 2 elections, the presidential elections, they've been a huge part of the success of mostly the Democratic Party. But in terms of turnout and things like that, students and young people, 18 to 29, the college years, are just becoming more and more politically active. Also, as students, you're affected by numerous different issues at all levels of politics on campus. This can be things like student loans, which is a really big deal right now, over $1 trillion in student loan debt, which Congress seems to not really want to do anything about or care about. Access to healthcare and contraception on college campuses, especially at private religious schools, can be a big issue. Getting adequate healthcare for women and access to birth control and other things like that on private religious campuses can be a very big struggle. There's a lot of social justice issues, contraception, LGBTQ issues, issues of race and things like that. There's all sorts of social justice issues at the college level that students can have a great impact on. And finally, of course, we're here with the Secular Coalition of America, and a big issue is separation of church and state. So, some of the scenarios that we hear about at the Secular Student Alliance are things like prayer and graduation ceremonies. They're very, very popular still today, even though many courts have ruled them to be unconstitutional. Schools just seem not to really care about that. So that's one way that you could get involved. If your school is using a invocation of some deity, usually the Christian one, at your graduation ceremony, that is a great chance for you to get involved in campus advocacy and activism. Anti-climate change displays and things like that. There's more and more groups coming to campuses trying to talk people out of the scientific fact of climate change and trying to confuse the debate about climate change. Has anybody in here heard of Brother Jed? No? Okay, he's a very evangelical campus preacher that travels around the Midwest, correct? And goes to different schools and just basically spews hate speech and really terrible things.
Public schools?
Yes, public universities and things like that, yep. Stands in their free speech zones and just says some really awful things. We've had a lot of student groups come up with great ways to counter demonstrate against his presence, But, you know, where I come from in Dayton, Ohio, we had what we called quad gods. And so this isn't just Brother Jed, this is all sorts of Christian and other evangelical organizations, like the Hare Krishnas as well, coming onto campus and proselytizing students. Gideon's handing out Bibles to students on campus and things like that. There's lots of opportunities to get involved in making sure state and church stay separated at that level. And finally, like I said, again, contraception in health student centers. It's a big battle that still needs to be fought. A lot of people are using the excuse of religious freedom to prevent women and even men from getting the proper health care and information they need to make wise choices about their sexual decisions. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways to get involved in campus and all sorts of reasons why, as students, you should be concerned about these things. Because you're not just, you know, there to get an education. It's more about the experience as well. And getting involved in politics will set you up for the rest of your life and give you leadership training and all sorts of great opportunities to become more involved in other issues and other movements as well. So now I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Dan Pemberton to talk about phase 2, which is the activist toolkit, which is some more practical applications about what specific things you can do on campus to fight some of these things that I just talked about. So, Dan.
Thank you. Well, actually, this so much isn't phase 2 as it is just a reference to the joke from South Park. Hey guys, what's phase 2? Where they had an idea of the underpants gnomes had an idea of stealing underpants, and then phase 3 was profit, and there was this big ethereal, mysterious gap in the middle, and that's kind of how I view a lot of the different ideas that I came across. I have come across my time with the SSA, where there's so many really interesting tactics that build up to larger strategies that really make sense, but aren't always that self-evident from the get-go. And just from having seen a lot of these and having the at least foggy clarity of hindsight, these are about 6 or 7 or 8 different pieces of a toolkit that I strongly recommend implementing when being an advocate or an activist on campus. A very quick note about advocacy versus activism is that an advocate is somebody who speaks on behalf of themselves or another person. An activist is somebody who works to affect change socially, politically, economically, or environmentally. But for the purposes of this talk, we're not only going to embrace the overlap, we're probably going to use the words interchangeably. That isn't really going to affect a whole lot for this workshop. However, a lot of literature I've looked at really splits hairs over the issue. Just thought I'd address that. But the toolkit, it's basically going to consist of lobbying, letter writing, petitions, collaborative partnerships, social media presence, media relations, demonstrations and rallies, and legal action. Not necessarily in that order, but there are a few others that a lot of people find to be separate or unique or disjoint from this list, but this is really the core 8 that I'm going to address here. Once again, this is just a very brief introduction to this. For some reason that was second slide. But what do they all have in common? All of them have the purpose of building and creating action takers. And what I mean by action taker is somebody who is separate from the initial advocacy or cause that the advocates are trying to turn into doers and people who will actually, in one capacity or another, work for their cause. And I'm going to have lots of different examples depending on the individual medium that is being used. Letter writing. Now, imagine for a moment that you're at a university where the graduation ceremonies are opening in sectarian prayer. This is specific. This is not just a general prayer that is just words of wisdom or something that's supposed to give people warm fuzzies before the graduation ceremony. It is explicitly to a specific God. It embraces a specific set of beliefs, a specific religion. It alienates and sets apart non-theists from the ceremony itself. Letter writing is a really good way to initiate activism and engage the administration on this issue. And for argument's sake, let's say that it is the president of the ceremony who is either giving the prayer or is directly endorsing the prayer. A letter to the president of the university is a really great way to first introduce yourself and make contact. Tell the administrator why you are reaching out. Starting from the beginning and being clear, very similar to the letters that we saw in the packets yesterday that we were dropping off to the congressional offices. That's a really, really good model for the letter writing to administrators. It can be a very effective act of diplomacy and treat it as such. There is a time to have strong recommendations and suggestions like we had at the end of the releases to the congressional offices, but this is not the time that an activist would be making very firebrandy-esque demands. The more diplomatic that the person who is reaching out to the administration can be at this point, the more effective you're going to be and the farther you're going to go. When doing the letter writing, as has been said yesterday, the actual physical writing of the letters, if you're sending them without going there in person, can be an obsolete medium. However, some offices do prefer, or some people prefer written letters. Ask about the preferred method of communication. Some administrators still don't do email. One of the administrators at my university right now is notorious all over the campus for just not answering emails because he simply does not understand it. And having said that, emails are a great way of establishing a digital paper trail. One of the reasons a lot of issues go on so long is because they are either not addressed or not addressed effectively, and there's no record of them being addressed. One of the really common responses when taking on issues, whether it's on campus or even in local politics, is we've never had this issue before. That's a really common response. Well, with the digital paper trail that school administrators have to, the emails anyway, they have to save on their server, well, when they say we've never had this issue before, you can say, and don't I know it. Like politicians, administrators don't like surprises. If you were planning on following up, which you should, if you were planning on following up, visiting them in person, let them know what you are expecting of them. Let them know what you want to see happen as the next step. Because if you do not build expectations and share your intentions, they have no idea where to go with this. They don't understand, from your perspective, where you want this to be taken in a week or in a month. Lobbying. The actual procedures of this, I'm not going to address a whole heck of a lot because they were expounded upon very, very well yesterday by Kelly, and many of you participated in the lobbying visits. However, lobbying is still really important to do on campus as well. Visiting administrators or even the aides or assistants to the administrators is really effective. It puts a face to the cause, and it sends the message that you and your cause are worth their time. The other advantage of coming in person is because you can present yourself and express yourself using multiple forms of communication, verbal, physical, etc. And when done correctly, that can be very, very effective at getting the administrators to take you and your group very seriously. Cordial and professional diplomacy. It works and is rather unexpected. One of the reasons that I stress the diplomatic approach first is because being professional can be rather unexpected from the administrator side. Students who are at universities, yes, they may be legal adults, but by many, many administrators are seen still as kids. Petitions. They are great for creating noise and buzz for your cause. They work symbiotically with social media. This is a really great way of getting people to see the issue that you may not, people to see the issue and people that you otherwise may not be able to communicate or speak with directly. It's also, petitions are really, really good at building an email or texting list. Email lists are very effective, but more and more people are specifically requesting to get their updates and news on these matters by text messaging. And they're also very helpful in lobbying, because if you go to an administrator and say that you have X number of people to support your cause, you have that. You have that number from work you put in and names and digital signatures that you work to get. In-person paper petitions are nice, they're good if there is a quota that is mandated to affect change, for example, on a state level if it's a proposition, but on a campus level, a lot of times just having the names and contact information is sufficient from an online petition. And petitions matter because the context matters. A lot of times I'll see petitions floating around Twitter or Facebook for some otherwise very ridiculous causes. Some celebrity that somebody wants to get deported for no other reason than they don't like them. The White House online petition website, whitehouse.gov, I believe, used to require 25,000 online signatures to address a particular issue, and pretty soon they were addressing whether or not they were going to build a Death Star. And so there are a lot of ridiculous petitions out there, but the medium is not the message. If you take your cause seriously and you have even some signatures on an online petition, then that will take you beyond that single medium. That will take you to the next steps. Oh, yeah, a quick reference about which online petition site to use. There are many. Definitely shop around. The biggest difference between change.org, iPetitions, Causes of Ask, Live Petitions, and all the rest of them mostly comes down to their cost, and some of them, very fine ones, are free, and also what you can do with the information afterward. If you need to save your information for later use, the real contact information, phone numbers, etc., then a website or a petition website that allows you to download that information, whether it's to a PDF, a spreadsheet, or some other format, is probably what you're looking for. A really good list is one that I found and I put at bit.ly/compare petitions. If you go there, there's an excellent summary comparing the different online petitions. The next one is collaborative. Yeah.
If you guys don't get the chance to write everything down, we are making this available to you afterwards. So don't feel like you have to take pictures or write everything down or anything like that.
Yeah, the collaborative partnerships, this is really key. The collaborative partnerships can mean one person, one group, partnering up from the beginning for a cause, especially if they have disjoint audiences, especially if they also have usually disjoint causes, but there's a single issue that unites them. Collaborative partnerships, there's actually a lot more benefits than I could spend this talk talking about, but it's the key ones are that you can increase the size of a stable, reliable base of supporters. And that basically means that for every serious group that has some form of social or political clout, they're going to have some solid base of supporters that will get behind their causes pretty consistently. And partnering up gives you access to them. You can tap into an audience that would have otherwise been unreachable, where partnering up with a particular organization, for example, if the issue was getting the Student Health Center to make contraception and birth control readily accessible. A secular group would, if a secular group was advocating for that, it might make sense to partner up with another group, whether it's a QLGBT group, maybe it's even a liberal Jewish group that has that's very pro-birth control. And those are disjoint audiences that now have at least doubled in size because they partnered up. It also helps show that your cause is not on the fringe. When you have other people that support your cause, you now no longer look like a minority from the beginning. You are not the odd one out. You are not you're not seen as basically, oh, those people over there. Your cause suddenly looks a little more mainstream. And also, unlikely partnerships create buzz. Right now, at my university, the Democratic Party Club and the Republicans are partnering up on a particular issue on our campus, mostly this anti-smoking law that's coming up that's also kind of strange. But the point is that everyone knows they're partnering up, and that's been in the paper for several weeks. Social media. It seems like every single week, there is another social media site or app that I had not heard of that I spend way too much time trying to figure out. and then removing from my phone after.
How's Snapchat going?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a tangent. I'm not going to cover that. I almost had a slide for Snapchat, but I'm not against it. But social media allows you to reach people in a lot of different ways. With this audience trying to preach on the merits and value of using social media, I'm basically preaching to the choir in this one. However, picking your battles with which social media sites to use in a social advocacy campaign can make or break the campaign, regardless of how well organized the rest of it is. A really quick contrast between two of the more popular social network sites, or maybe two of the most popular social network sites, Twitter and Facebook. One of the things that Twitter and Facebook have in common is that they are social network sites that serve a general audience. They are not too terribly niche or specific with their audience or future target users. They, as long as you're 13 years old, you can have accounts on these sites. But there are otherwise some very different effects of using these. Twitter, you can reach a broad audience, and it's ridiculously simple. 140 characters, you can get your message out. It's easy to network. It's really easy to find people on there. It's really easy to tag others and to see what everyone else is posting. And you could actually talk to the decision makers. And the difference between this and Facebook is most people who are on Twitter, most famous people who are on Twitter, or people who might be school administrators or even politicians, they run their own Twitter account. You can have any number of like pages on Facebook that can be fan pages. It doesn't mean that that person is on his or her account. Twitter usually does. And also with organizations and larger causes, multiple people can run a single Twitter account. With Facebook, there's a massive user base. Facebook's a little more of a multi-generational social network site. I mean, my grandmother is on Facebook and knows how to use it quite well. It's more interactive than Twitter. There are any number of different ways to use Facebook. The way I think about Facebook is if you have other social media sites that specialize in just doing one thing, only sharing photos or only giving one-liner posts and updates, Facebook is the collection of all of those together. In fact, most people would only use about 2/3 to 3/4 of all of the features of Facebook. Very few individuals would actually utilize Facebook for everything it's worth, partially because it is overkill. It works really well with connecting with other social networks. A lot of people who post on Twitter will just link their Twitter account with their Facebook, so they only have to post in one place. The same goes with Instagram, Pinterest, a few other really big ones now. And you can organize or manage your organization pages from your personal account. You do not need to have multiple logins for Facebook. Media relations. A little separate from social media, this has more to do with engaging with campus newspaper or maybe even the local paper. The big advantage to this, publicity. This also allows you to set the narrative. When you have a press release prepared and sent out early on, you get to set the narrative for what is going on, and you get to be the one to determine what story others are telling about you and your cause. And it's great for initial media coverage. A lot of local papers will want to keep an eye on early social advocacy campaigns and efforts in case they really take off and they go somewhere, and they'll be there from the beginning. A press release that is a really, really good idea to know how to write and prepare is a formal news tip that is emailed, faxed, or sometimes snail mail to newsrooms. It should read like a short newspaper article. This is a really, really good way of explaining what your cause is, what it is addressing, and specifically what you're looking to have others do. There's a reason you're communicating with the local news, and that is ultimately to get others to hear your message and to do something, become action takers. The press release contains a headline, contact information, a summary paragraph, and some direct quotations and people involved in the story. And it should be no longer than 450 words. Just those 4 lines are really vague, and there are some excellent workshops and materials for how to write effective press releases. The best one, secularstudents.org/media relations. There are several press release examples there. and you can just swap out the details and personalize them as needed. But press releases are a really good way of controlling specifically the quotes and quote bites that are going to be used. When you get really good with press releases, you can actually control and anticipate pretty darn well which quotes are going to land in the paper because of how they're written and how they look as written language, not just spoken language.
Real quick note, Dan. Press releases have a very specific format. So do make sure that you don't just write an email and send it to a news station. There is a very specific format for how they have to be written. So make sure you do check out that page so that you get the, because there's like an exact number of symbols that you have to use and all sorts of different weird esoteric stuff. So make sure you know how to do it before you try.
And one of the reasons I'm kind of cutting myself off with the details on the press releases is because once you open up that can of worms, you start going down that rabbit hole, you're gonna spend an hour on it. And the thing is, that's why I'm giving you that link, because that link covers everything. There are really excellent YouTube videos that SSA has made that are specifically about constructing and strategizing a press release. Demonstrations. Demonstrations can include anything from tabling or rallies of pretty much any size, from one person to several hundred. They get a lot of attention. If you're in the quad holding signs, using a booth, a table, an easy up, it's gonna get a lot of people to stop and listen, if only for 5 seconds, to what your cause is. It also energizes supporters. If you have a large group out there, a lot of the people who are showing up who may have been casually involved with your group or your cause now get to see where it is going and physically what is becoming of it that day. It's also really good for in-person networking. People come up to your table, you get to meet them, you get to introduce yourself and share one-on-one anecdotes, personal stories about what this cause is doing on your campus. Whether it's prayer before graduation ceremonies that are alienating and really separating non-theists, if it is getting access to birth control in the student health center, or even if it's even if it's not necessarily an issue the administration can address. Demonstrations in the quad can also be set up right next to Brother Jed, or maybe if the Westboro Baptist Church or Ray Comfort come to your school. Just setting up even a silent table with signs and a booth right there handing out literature right next to it. You get to cash in on their crowd. Signs communicate the message through photographers. This is a really good way of getting people to see your message later on. If your signs are clear and they're well made, people want to take pictures of them. And the demonstration or the rally is symbolic of the inertia the campaign is taking. If you're to the point where a lot of people are showing up to your table, to your rally, that's a really good indication of how far you've come. However, demonstrations are usually only symbolic. Once again, the medium is not the message. Demonstrations by themselves don't usually solve the problems that are much larger, that have a multi-platform aspect to the campaign. It's great when a lot of people show up to a rally, show up to a demonstration. It's got to go somewhere after that. Also, if a lot of people don't show up to the demonstration, don't worry about it. Less can be more, because having a small group usually means that it's a lot easier to communicate with them and keep a really nice atmosphere to the crowd that's there. And it's also, if it gets too big, a lot of times that crowd and whatever happens when a mob mentality sets in, that's the story people remember, not the message that you wanted to deliver. There are a lot of very well-meaning organizations that as soon as they got big and successful and had a rally, all of a sudden the news is now reporting on what a lot of kind of jerks did at the rally. Signs they had up that had nothing to do with the original message, hate speech that comes out of the event, and that's usually what is the footnote on the Wikipedia page that seems like can never go away. Demonstrations are great, but I strongly recommend only using them when they're necessary. If it is about setting up next to Brother Jed or a pro-life group on campus, then go for it. But showing up to the president of your campus's office with a giant demonstration outside before you've written any letters or had any one-on-one contact, it's probably not a good way of getting what you want out of them. And the last one, legal action. This is really, really good if you really feel your hands are tied. If the administration is not engaging with the students or ignoring you altogether. If there is a direct violation of the Establishment Clause, or if you see mingling of the church and state on your campus, definitely reach out to Freedom from Religion Foundation, Secular Students, secularstudents.org, where you can reach us. And then also there's the FIRE. The specific links to get right to contacting us, secularstudents.org/legal help, and then the Freedom from Religion Foundation is ffrf.org/legal/report. In review, primary objective should be to create action takers. Get other people to get on board with your cause and to want to take action, even in other ways than what you already have in mind. May the force be with you. Your basic toolkit.
I've never heard someone say that. I know, yeah.
Your basic toolkit involves letter writing, lobbying, petitions, collaborative partnerships, media relations, social media, demonstrations, and legal help. Use what you need to succeed and cut the rest. Don't burn yourself out pursuing every single social media site or every single aspect of this. If your school administrator really thinks he or she is following the law and learns in a well-referenced letter that there is something wrong and they're going to address it, might not need to bring in the lawyers on this one. Also, diplomacy works. Seriously. A lot of young people like to create noise and want to step up and fight for a cause, which is great. However, we need the full spectrum of activists on this. It isn't just the people that want to make really, really well-made signs or have a megaphone in the quad, but sometimes also letter writing and lobbying doesn't go far enough in this. Strongly recommend that the collaborative partnerships are also pursued, because then you really get the full range of activists for your cause in your social media campaign. Thank you very much. Oh, 2:32. Wow, we have time for questions.
I'm going to put my moderator hat back on, and with the sole purpose of just reminding everyone that questions have question mark.
And an upward inflection at the end.
Usually. Anyway, and so just, if someone monopolizes the conversation, I'm probably going to cut you off. But take it away.
I will not monopolize the conversation. That was not my question.
That was a statement. Did not have a question.
I felt like a lot of this stuff, a lot of the suggestions, especially in terms of legal action, are very effective on public campuses, where they're more susceptible to general laws. How do people who go to private institutions make these changes and navigate the institution that is sort of independent of a lot of the framework that most students deal with?
So in my work as a high school campus organizer, I am also responsible for any sort of legal trouble or issues that might come up with student groups, both at public and private high schools. And I've actually helped a private school, a private high school, it's an Episcopalian school. They've opened up very much in the past decade. They require students to have a sort of faith time area where they have to go and sit in on some sort of faith-based activity, whether that's church, Bible study, Buddhist meditation, Hindu devotions. They offer everything but humanism. And I've worked with the school repeatedly and the group advisor and the students at the school to try to put forward proposals on how to get secular humanism offered as an alternative to the Episcopalian services. Having said that, it can be very difficult because they're under no obligation to really listen to you. So, having said that, using your toolkit, what I would recommend is leave out the legal action. It's not going to really help you in that situation, but what is going to help you is getting students organized on that campus and active about that issue. The students are going to be the base at private schools to affect change, and communicating with administrators as well. But also being very diplomatic. So, as Dan said repeatedly, diplomacy works. If you go into the office and you're all firebrandy, which I have no problem with, I think we need all of the spectrum of atheism here. But if you go into the office of a private school and you start slamming your fist on the table and saying, I want this, I want that, they're very unlikely to listen to you. Going and explaining very calmly about how this can increase diversity in the school, how we should have a commitment to diversity and things like that, framing it in a diplomatic and I'm trying to think of the word, a diplomatic and all-encompassing way, something that they can also buy into, is very effective. So for instance, the school that I'm working with to try to get humanism offered as an alternative, we've tried maybe 2 or 3 times to get the administration to listen, and they're just like, no, every time. So finally I said, here's something that might be the sticking point. You go and tell your administrators that that they're committed to diversity. It says in their mission statement they're committed to diversity, but not just that, approach it that way, but also tell them that we are more than happy to tell the media that they are the first private high school in America to offer a secular humanist alternative. And I told them to go tell that to their administrators. I haven't heard back from them, but that can be a very effective tool because that makes the administration look great in the media, and who doesn't want that for their school? Because it is a private school, people have to pay to go there, and it draws more attention to them. So you can use all sorts of things to put on the table. And I would encourage you to do that. It can kind of feel slimy, like you're trying to coerce people into doing it, but it really works out best for both people. They get to get good media, and you get the end that you want.
There's a great book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath that talks about implementing change. And there's a lot of great techniques in there. Sort of the 3 points are giving really clear direction, so a very specific ask about what you may be trying to accomplish, and then also motivating them in a way to do it, so providing some incentive or some emotional reason, so they want to look good in the media, or they have a commitment to providing great development for their students, all of their students, and so they want to fulfill this, so on and so forth. And then the third one is sort of making it easy for them to do that, giving them the tools they need. If they need a curriculum or if they need an instructor, providing recommendations or providing a curriculum sample can really go a long way. But it's a great book. I very much recommend it.
And one other quick note, despite the fact that private schools are often outside of the purview of law, they can still be sued. And they still have to often adhere to certain federal laws. So if you do get stuck at a point, sometimes legal help can still be a good pivoting point for them. But it would not be my first strategy. I would use other things like social media and tabling and talking with the administrators and things like that first. But great question.
And that's also not to say that you can't reach out to Freedom from Religion Foundation or the Secular Student Alliance.
Absolutely.
It doesn't suddenly cut you out of it as soon as you reach out. It means that there is now a dialogue open with other organizations that would rather address this behind the scenes, because it's expensive and very timely and time-consuming to go public and to get into the courts with this and that sort of thing. Most of the time, that is what organizations are trying to avoid.
Other questions?
Go for it.
Yep.
How important is following up after lobbying?
Huge. It's absolutely huge. It is, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, it makes you look better. I mean, it makes you look like a professional adult who knows how to have interactions with officials, which we are. So we obviously want to look like that. But also it's a reminder of the issues you had. I mean, repetition is a key in learning, so we want them to learn and do something so we can keep reminding them of it. And it also gives you a chance to actually follow up and ask them, what change can we expect? When can we expect to hear from you again? Should I come back in a couple of weeks? Or hey, it was great to see you. I'll check back in a couple of weeks to see how it's going. And that kind of follow-up. And if the administrator knows that you're going to come asking again, it lights a little bit more of a fire under them than if you just say, okay, thanks for meeting, peace out. And they're like, oh, great, I'm never going to hear from that guy again. I can just ignore this now.
Right, and all of the letters that I write to administrators who are either stonewalling our groups or something like that, I always make sure to put a concrete date at which I want to hear back from them, or that I'm going to reach back out to them. Because that gives me a reminder of the issue, because we're all busy and things slide off of our plates and slide off administrators' plates as well. But it also lets them know that you take this very seriously and you want to hear back from them by a certain time. And also, if you don't hear back from them, it gives you a little bit more leverage to tell people who might be potential supporters, hey, look, we're kind of getting ignored about this. It can give you some very good talking points as well.
In Amanda Knief's book, The Citizen Lobbyist, she breaks it down really well, the style and rhetoric that goes into letter writing and into lobbying and to following up. It's a really quick read, small book. I strongly recommend looking at it, because that whole section of approaching administrators, making contact and following up, it addresses all of that.
Did you have a question? Oh, yep.
This question is for Liz. What have you guys done to consolidate all of the different youth group movements in the secular community, humanists, free thinkers? What have you guys done to consolidate that under one umbrella where you can have a little bit more strength and unity and a bigger presence?
So we've created this organization called the Secular Student Alliance, which is, I know, right? But jesting aside, one of the strongest elements of the SSA's existence is that we are a very large tent. And we give no fucks about what you call yourself. If you are a secular student organization, we want to be working with you, and we want to support you. And so what we've been able to do with that is bring together a whole spectrum of groups, from the very warm, fuzzy, interfaithy, community servicey humanist groups, all the way over to the smut for smut angry atheists, and bring them together into one umbrella. And all of our groups are autonomous. We don't tell our groups what to do, which is why we have the fuzzy interfaith groups and smut for smut. Not that either of them is wrong, but we're not telling groups to do either of these things. But we support them in those decisions. And the two real benefits from that we get are that first, it means we have a very large umbrella and a very large base from which to work. And so when I go and work with the Department of Education, for example, I'm not saying I work with a handful of students. I work with thousands of students. Our network is about 35,000.
You know your total member?
So we have 320 affiliate groups. We have 2,000-ish unaffiliated student members who are not affiliated with individual groups. We have 122 secular safe zone allies, and the network altogether is about 35,000.
Anything in Howard University?
It's a little bit cyclical. They're doing a rebuilding right now.
Yeah, next fall, we go to George Washington University, and we are organizing the DC Secular Student Coalition with a bunch of different schools at American University. Yeah. And we're talking to a couple people from Howard, but apparently their president transferred to Harvard, and they're going to be rebuilding it this fall.
Harvard stealing all our good people?
Yeah, it's Oh, no.
Yeah, I think if HCBUs and places like that is imperative to be in there strong.
It is.
Showing that you have a support base and a group of people.
It is, and it's been, I'm going to be really honest, HBCUs have been really challenging for us. It has been very hard for us to organize sustainably in the historically black colleges.
With them.
Yeah, and we do. So we want to
deny us.
Right. So we're working on it, and we have a lot of plans in place. But I would be lying if I said we had a huge presence there right now.
So I have two questions, but we also have questions.
Go ahead.
First off, is there any like inter-college kind of activism or anything that we could be doing? Like we have our group at our campus, but it'd be really cool to also do stuff with other campuses.
Yes.
Is there any? I don't know if you guys have any like anything.
Where we have regional staff, which is only about 40% of the country right now, one of the big things we do is, Andy says only, is connect groups together to do inter-campus work. However, in the rest of the country, we still encourage that facilitation. We just use volunteers to drive it. And I can't read your name badge. Where are you from right now?
I'm at George Mason University.
George Mason. So this DC coalition, we're actually talking to Sarah right now to get her hooked into that network of volunteers to do exactly what you guys are doing to facilitate that inter-campus cooperation.
What was your second question?
The second question was, are there any good strategies you have to keep a group going as the leadership graduates?
Our ideal is that you never have people in their last year of school running the group, because that is asking for them to graduate and the group to die. So we encourage underclass leadership, and we really encourage ongoing promotion and recruitment and very proactive leadership transition planning. And we have resources for all of these things on our website at secularstudents.org.
Yeah, I was going to say we've developed a great deal because attrition and stuff due to failure in leadership transition is a huge thing, probably the number one cause that kills our group. So we have a lot of resources that focus on leadership transitions on our website, so I'd encourage you to check them out.
In fact, leadership transitions is probably the one topic I'm most passionate about when it comes to campus organizing, because it doesn't just help groups survive, it makes it so when leadership transitions help or happen effectively, the group now is sustained and continues to be built on that sustainability. It gets larger, and there's a sustained secular community on that campus. I host bi-weekly Google Hangouts with affiliates in my region, which anyone's more than welcome to join in. But the very first one I ever did, leadership transitions. That was the very first topic I ever talked about, because that is key.
It's huge.
Yes.
Benjamin.
So the president of my club recently proposed working with high school students. I mean, he was vague as far as, exactly the proposal, but what would you recommend as far as working? You said that was your area, right? So.
It is, yeah. You're from the American University?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there are very, very weird rules and laws about outside organizations working with high school groups. And the TLDR version, the too long didn't read version, is that most high schools, especially public schools, prevent outside organizations from coming onto campus and interacting with students. So you're probably not going to have a lot of luck if your idea is to go onto campus and try to talk to students. They are not going to let you. They might not even let you
in the building.
Yeah, well, they definitely won't let you in the building. They might not even let you stand outside and hand out literature. There's a lot of schools have policies against that as well, both for us and religious people. The only people that have access to high schools pretty much regularly are military recruiters and other government officials. Yeah, right? Yay! That's what we need. Yeah. But if you want to reach out in terms of things off campus, I'd be more than happy to chat with you further about some strategies that could be helpful. Yeah, sure.
Would that apply to private schools? I know one
high schools?
Yeah, private high schools.
Absolutely. They're probably even more strict.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say there are ways around that. If you tie in, if you want to work with high schools or middle schools, you can do like a tutoring initiative, talk to the administration, get in there. We actually did a little program a couple years ago where we did a fundraiser, it got money and bought a bunch of books and brought them to a local clinic. And then we just went to the clinic and read to the kids there because the kids there weren't with families that would sit down with them and read every day. So we just sat down and we bought the kids books. So we read the book with them and then they were happy they got to take the book home with them.
That's actually a great, I was going to suggest that to him later, that one of the ways to kind of get in is to kind of weasel your way in and
Churches
and,
do this all the time.
and volunteer at a football game or tutor or volunteer at the school library or whatever opportunities there are. Use those opportunities to go and interact with high school students, build those relationships, and if a group comes up, let me know, because I would love to add them to our affiliate list.
Or-
I help run one of a different org, the International Fair Society, and we actually have a private high school within our campus called School Without Walls, and they actually let our student organization come to their high school to tutor kids on Model United Nations. And one of the ideas that was floating around the internet was, there's a big need for like secular student, secular community buildings. So like there's atheist high schoolers who do not have the same sense of community that say a Christian org might have.
Right.
And they might be looking for like maybe perhaps tutors that are like a secular nature that
Absolutely.
are older but not necessarily so old that it becomes awkward. Like,
Right.
I've just been informed that we are up against our time limit, so this is going to be the 30-second or less for people who've already had their hands up. So Cody, I can't read your name tag from here,
Really,
and Dan.
really quick response to that, and also, if you want to build relationships with high school students, do Camp Quest over the summer. Just simple as that. That is the fastest, best way to start building one-on-one relationships.
Instead of like turning this into a question, I want to say Jessica Griffin, who works as a regional coordinator for
Yep.
SSA, actually did something very interesting when she was a student organizer. She actually went in and did like a presentation on what humanism is for religions.
She did, actually, that's right. And there's stuff about that on the Secular Students
Yes,
website.
there's a write-up, there.
Yep.
And I thought that was a great idea. That's
That is a
really good
great idea.
And
That's actually how I met Jessica.
You can be like, we're not going to start a group, but if you need to contact us. About
Oh, we're totally right here.
Yeah.
Samira?
Samira.
Samira.
Actually, this question is for you because you worked with secular.
I'm actually not going to take any more questions. I'm gonna hold the questions so that you guys can talk after because we need to clear the room for the next panel.
And so on that note, in this room in 15 minutes will be how to host your own lobby day, and next door we'll be working with other religious organizations and groups.